totally fine.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Hello, YouTube, and good afternoon. Welcome to Smudcast number 583. Resident Evil 4's design. I don't know what pipe RttRL means. It's probably
Sorry to cut you off, but Ginga mentions it in the chat. He says it means road to the rocket launcher. It's this guy's series of Resident Evil videos where he covers each game.
Nice.
Resident Evil game.
Okay, so he's obviously a Resident Evil fan. He knows what he's talking about. That's good.
Yeah.
It's going to at least ensure that we're talking to a professional or a guy who knows his stuff, that we're not going to have too many qualms with, because it's like, nope, that's wrong. He's going to have good, accurate data, and we're going to get a margarita. We're going to chill out, and we're going to just listen to him, and he's going to be, yep, okay, everything's cool. So I hope. I don't know. He could be totally wrong. He could suck. But it sounds like he put a lot of thought and effort. It's a 30-minute video, so I'm assuming he knows what he's talking about. It's almost 46,000 views. He uploaded in September of this year, so I don't see too many downvotes, only 36 compared to 2.8 thousand upvotes. So I think he knows what he's talking about. All right. Gigaman is slowly coming with us here today. But we're going to start without him, and I'm sure he's not going to miss much, so it's okay.
Nah.
All right, let's get going.
Resident Evil 4 opens with extreme confidence. After a quick summary of Resident Evil 2 and 3, the slate is wiped clean. The Umbrella Corporation, the entity responsible for the disasters of previous games, was ended between titles in a surprisingly mundane way.
Okay, so we have to give a recap ourselves. Umbrella Corporation wants to do something with human experimentation. They create zombies. We have a bunch of characters throughout the years of... What is it called, the team that tries to stop them? The police?
Stars. Like the remnants of the Stars team. Like, actually, they were like sent in as like, let's send these people in as guinea pigs, like live fire test subjects, essentially.
Okay.
And yeah.
Interesting.
But it's always funny because, like, in every Resident Evil game from 1, 2, 3, and Code Veronica, they're like, each character's like, it's up to us to take down Umbrella. And then when you get to Resident Evil 4, it's like, the legal system brought down Umbrella. The United States government actually brought down Umbrella in between, like Code Veronica and Resident Evil 4.
Right.
In the back rooms, essentially.
So they're not U.S. Marshals. There's some sort of...
They were like essentially like a glorified SWAT team, essentially. The STARS, Special Tactics and Rescue Service, is what STARS stands for.
Okay, but they don't actually rescue people; they just kill everything they see.
So, they like I said, they were essentially like a glorified SWAT team. They weren't even open that long. They started like in the lore. They were like they were. The team was formed in 1996, and then of course the game takes place in 1998. So like a couple of years.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so
it's hard to follow because there's just so many games and you sort of lose track. And the focus is not the setup; it's sort of the where are you, who are you, what's going on, who are the enemies, do you have enough bullets, etc., etc. So it's not, the lore is important; it's just not as important as the horror and adventure puzzle part of the gaming.
Yeah, essentially, like the early games were pretty much just you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you got to survive.
Right.
With like here's a gun, survive. That's it.
And Resident Evil 4, as we all know, added a whole bunch of new features that made it more action-packed, more cinematic.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people liked, a lot of people didn't like. It's kind of a mixed bag of fans out there. But
I always found it to be like the most divisive of like the Resident Evil games. Like it was the turning point.
Yeah, that was interesting because I'm doing a poll for all these games, and I think you brought up, because you love Resident Evil, and you brought up 2 and 4. 2 was like the definitive sort of, this is how Resident Evil is, and then 4 was like, this is how it's now going to be. And that was the big choice between which was the fan favorite and why. So interesting. There's of course there's many more Resident Evil games. But
and don't get me wrong, I like Resident Evil 4. Don't get me wrong, I like it. I mean, I owned it for a long time, and then I bought it on VR when it came out. So I like it.
Cool. Okay, let's keep going.
currently being tied to the events of past games, caused a stock collapse. As their logo, a symbol that's synonymous with the series, falls away. The words Resident Evil 4 appear on the screen, beckoning in a new era. This recap is here purely to reset the status quo. Umbrella barely tie into the events of the game later on. This isn't foreshadowing. This is here simply to establish that you're entering a much different game this time around, and that's overall fairly accurate. 4 is the biggest departure yet from past entries, not just in terms of setting and story, but presentation, gameplay, and structure. That said, RE4's design is still substantially informed by what came before. It builds on and remixes elements from past titles, while brazenly adding mechanics the series has never had, and omitting some the series has always had. All of this makes it so fascinating to analyze, and the fact that it coalesces into something great, also such a worthwhile study in game design.
Resident Evil 4.
Leon S. Kennedy is back, this time as an experienced government agent, tasked with finding the president's missing daughter.
So he's a FBI guy, I guess.
Then I think he's like attached to like the Secret Service.
Yes.
And that's like something I've heard like some people bring up recently is like, so wait, why are you sending a guy that's like specially trained in fighting, zombies and other monsters to find the president's daughter? Isn't that like the Secret Service's job?
Well, remember that back during this time, the series was going off of Resident Evil 2's Claire A. Leon B. In which he kills both Birkin and X.
Yeah,
so
Mr. X, yeah.
You wouldn't want to send the badass that kills those two monsters in one go to find your daughter.
Right, but they, if you think about it, it's like all they know right now is that she's been kidnapped by normal people. Like they don't know about the Plagas and all that yet. So I mean, I think that's like some people that's like brought that up recently is like, ever since like the remake of 4 coming out.
Also, Operation Javier and Dark Side Chronicles.
Oh yeah, that too. I never played that. I don't have a Wii, so I never played that.
So it's not. The point is that it's not like this is his first mission either. He's been doing
No. I wasn't saying that
for a while. No. I know. I'm just saying. It's like this is part of why the president himself is the one in charge of him in the first place.
True.
All right.
Mainly because of the Raccoon City incident.
Yeah.
Interesting. So he's just some special op guy of no name denomination. All right.
A high-ranking operative, yes.
Okay, cool. Good enough for me.
In rural Spain, the locals aren't friendly.
Chainsaw.
Like Code Veronica, RE4 ditches the pre-rendered backdrops all the numbered entries had made use of up till now. Unlike Code Veronica though, which didn't make significant gameplay alterations with that change, RE4 positions the camera directly behind the player at all times during regular gameplay, allowing for control over where it's facing. I'd say it's most reminiscent of the unlockable shoulder camera angle from Silent Hill 1, that made it so the aim button would always bring the camera behind the player. The biggest difference between SH1 in RE4 and older Resis in RE4 is that it doesn't have a lock-on. Here, when holding the aim button, you have free yet precise control of where your gun is pointing. This opens up a well of opportunities for combat depth. Up to here, Resident Evil titles were really struggling to come up with fresh combat scenarios after 6 games of its basic lock-on gunplay. But now, this manual aim system means that enemies can have a larger array of weak points. You can shoot legs to slow enemies down, deflect incoming thrown objects, or stagger foes with a shot to the face. Certain weak points can trigger context-sensitive prompts that can be used to perform special attacks that hit multiple foes. Bosses also benefit drastically from this change. Compared to past titles, they can move around the environment in more complex ways, and have more creatively placed weak points. This lends them a great sense of identity, more memorable than just one big giant hitbox gliding through the level. This manual aim system increases the challenge, having to drag your sights over to an enemy yourself. But the added freedom and larger array of potential weak points means that mastering the aiming will make a player more efficient and deadlier than in the prior titles.
And then the aiming became completely busted in the Wii version.
How so?
It's the Wii motion. It's the Wii pointing. The aim just got a hell of a lot better.
Oh, because of using the Wii nunchuck or whatever you're using to
Because
aim?
because of the aim, because of the Wii pointer. Yes,
I see. So it was actually better on the Wii.
it was a hell of a lot better. Almost broke the game.
Really?
Yeah, it's pretty good in the VR. It's pretty good in the
The
VR
point-
version too.
That too. And back in the Wii version, it was so good to the point where, if I remember correctly, the TMP and the Red 9 had stocks you could put on them to stabilize them. In the Wii version, you did not need those at all.
Wow.
Cool.
But that's I mean, well, sorry to go on for a little longer. It's like that's one of the few. That's one of those cases where the Wii motion controls, we rag on them for being shoehorned, but in a couple situations, they're actually really fucking good, especially for the shooters that came out for the console.
Yeah, and if you're talking about VR games, you want that level of... Well, it's not an accelerometer. They're actually using a gyroscope in the newer Wii nunchuck versions, so you want that level of accuracy when you're aiming a gun and you have a laser pointer. That's really helpful. So in VR, you need to have... Depending on the VR game, I don't know how it's done in Resident Evil 4, but you see how they do it in Half-Life. It's very like point. You go from here, then you focus on another point. You locomote to that area. It's very like here to there. It's not where you think of as a video game with your arrow keys, where you can move around freely in the 3D environment. VR game is a little different. So I don't know if that's how they did it with Resident Evil 4.
Well, at least with the more recent Resident Evil games, 7 and 8 with VR, I think in those you can move manually with the VR.
I think so. I don't know if you can do the teleportation thing like in like most first-person VR games with Resident Evil 4. I don't know because I use the regular, moving.
They usually give you the option. I know that's the only way they could do it in Alex, because that's what that from the specific way they made that game. But I think at least the recent Resis give you the option of either one or the other.
Yeah, I think it is, but I've always used like the thumbsticks,
Yes,
playing VR
because that's just the muscle memory.
Right, and it's also because like motion sickness too. I believe, it makes some people sick if you use the teleportation or something like that, or no, if you use the motion. If you actually like walk with your character, it makes you motion sick.
Well, there's people, I remember back in game school, people were getting sick just playing Unreal without VR. And it's just because the nature of 3D and the color scheme and the lighting. There's many ways people can get sick playing any 3D game just because your brain acts up on you when you're trying to focus in the peripheral. And your brain's like, no, you're going to fall. And it's like, no, I'm playing a two-dimensional screen. I'm fine. So your brain is constantly fighting with you. In certain people, in certain scenarios, it's crazy at times when you're in VR. I haven't played games in VR, but I had demos in VR because I was working with the Oculus Rift about 6 years ago, and a lot of people were like falling over using it for the first time.
It does take some getting used to, yeah.
Yeah,
And then there's the Virtual Boy.
Oh, really? The Virtual Boy is a whole that is a doctor's study on how to hurt your patients by looking through a tiny little pinhole and tricking your brain into thinking there are objects coming at them when it's not. So,
how to use video games to commit suicide?
How to get a headache in less than 2 minutes exactly. Yeah.
How to hurt yourself with video games? Step 1: the Virtual Boy.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Compensate,
Labo
enemy
later,
numbers
but...
get bulked up. You're frequently dealing with big hordes of enemies this time around, or a substantial group of enemies with 1 or 2 bullet sponges thrown in as well. Just like before, to attack, you need to plant your feet and hold your ground. You still can't move while aiming, so the intense rhythm of combat of past games becomes even more intense here. Weighing up whether you have time to keep shooting before the first enemy reaches you, or whether you should go reposition, becomes an even more intense affair, with so many enemies descending on you, and with so many different weak spots in front of you to choose from. It makes for tricky split-second decisions. Some areas let you delay the assault by knocking down ladders or barricading doors, giving you even more to factor in. You can no longer reload in the menu either, meaning you have to create a safe space to do it now. Enemies still hit super hard too, but unlike in past titles, you take that massive damage pretty quickly before regaining control, keeping the pace frantic and hectic. Combat is less logistical, weighing up whether you have enough bullets and space between yourself and an enemy you're locked onto to kill them before they reach you, gets swapped out for play far more reliant on your dexterity, reliant on reaction times rather than pre-planning. Not to say that pre-planning isn't still important, like in classic Resi, keeping all your weapons fully loaded so you can perhaps switch to a different gun painlessly at a moment's notice is a good idea. You still have limited inventory, so keeping a balanced selection of ammo and healing items for different scenarios can also make a difference. But now your success in combat is going to depend a lot more on your reflexes. Of course, with the switch to basically one angle for the whole game, you do lose a little something. Sometimes the camera zooms out a bit to give you a better look at a larger area, or zooms in to increase the tension and feeling of claustrophobia. But this to me feels like the game standing on its toes to look taller. It struggles to reach the stylistic shelf its predecessors could effortlessly.
What does that mean, the stylistic shelf? What did the other games do that were stylistic for?
Well, in the older Resident Evil games, it was all fixed camera angles. You know, like the camera would be set up in one spot.
Yep.
And your character could move, you know, through it. And then like once you like reached a certain point, the camera would shift to another angle. You know, and it created in the early games, it created like a sense of tension because you didn't know what was coming around the corner or what was there.
Yeah.
Like you could hear it, but you couldn't see it. So that got people on edge.
Plus your control scheme was totally different as soon as that camera changed. You had to be like, what's left again? Oh no.
Yeah, well, no, like you're moving and then all of a sudden the camera changes and it's like, oh, it suddenly gets reversed on you.
And all that because the fixed camera angles were as a direct result of the developers wanting to get more out of the game graphically, and the fixed camera angles were the compromise that they went with.
Yeah, back on the PlayStation.
I heard somewhere that like
the remake. You look at the remake now. You look at even the HD remaster. It's like, holy shit, that looks amazing.
You talking about which? You talking about RE4? Or are you talking about?
No, I'm talking about like Resident Evil 1, but I'm skipping ahead to the remake because the remake of Resident Evil 1 stuck with the fixed camera angles. But
that gets praised a lot.
But because it has more horsepower, especially now, to give the higher graphical fidelity, which was the purpose of the camera angles, you look at like the HD remaster on PC, and I'm just like, holy shit, this looks amazing. The backgrounds look amazing. It's almost seamless.
Yeah. They managed to recapture like the angles and everything, the tension, the horror, but it was a really good remake. I mean, even though they changed like a good chunk of that game, they still kept true to the original format.
Everything.
But I heard somewhere that in the reason why the camera angles were that way were because like the graphical limitations of like the PlayStation, like that's one of the reasons why they kept them like that for so long, is because like it was the hardware, like they couldn't do what they wanted to. I might be wrong about that, but I thought I heard somewhere like
true. Yes.
Oh, it is true. Okay.
It's so that they could get the most out of their games graphically, but then by the time of 3, and then because of the whole debacle with the whole deal that they made with Sony to keep it Sony exclusive, even though it ended up being just for one game.
Oh yeah, Code Veronica.
And then the whole debacle with trying to sell RE4 to Sony, they said no. And then the whole story behind Microsoft saying no, which people have made videos about, it's hilarious. And then when it landed on Nintendo, that's the whole reason why Resident Evil 4 is the way it is, because it allowed them to do so much more than they could before.
Yeah, I think I heard somewhere that like for the Resident Evil 1 remake, like the GameCube engine was like so powerful, like they didn't need like the door loading screens anymore. But like people got
in for nostalgia.
Yeah, no, I think I heard read somewhere like people got mad. Like, oh, they took out the door loading screens. It ruins my immersion. And they're like, okay, we'll put them back.
Yeah, immersion and nostalgia. And that's to the point where that's why in the DS remake of RE1, which is not that much of a downgrade, it's still close to the PS1 version, but you can skip the doors in that version.
Okay, so the main element is the camera and the fact that Resident Evil 4 is 3D. You can control more accurately where you're aiming and moving at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Yeah, and
fact that
I think they were just like following the trend at that time. Like, third-person shooters were taking off at that time. They were getting really popular.
no,
Well, I mean, like more
Resident-
popular than they were, but like,
no, Resident Evil 4 is the one that started it.
oh, was it? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
It's
that's right. Because
it's
it
because of
came
the-
up before Dead Space, right?
Yeah, it was Resident Evil 4 2005 for the GameCube.
Okay, I couldn't remember.
It was such a big deal. It's the fact that it was such a big deal that a game like Resident Evil 4, one of the most anticipated games of that generation, aside from Twilight Princess, but that's a whole other can of worms. But Resident Evil 4, at least third party, was one of the biggest anticipated titles, especially after it rebranded like its early prototype in the DMC1, which we've talked about before.
Yeah.
But the fact that this high-profile action survival horror game from this big series was going to be Nintendo exclusive, at least for a little while, but you get my point. That's where people started picking up the trend, just like how like the hack and slash genre really picked up.
I think he mentions the early build of RE4 in this video.
Right.
Yeah.
Like he shows some footage of it. He shows some footage of the early build, like when you're fighting the Hookman.
The Hookman and the Shadow.
Yeah.
And this is a year before Gears of War popularized the third-person cover shooter or action cover shooter style genre. So I think Resident Evil 4 was the one that popularized the concept.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is during the time of, I think, Metal Gear Solid 3 also came out. I can't remember when that was released.
That was 04, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
And ironic that the RE4 came out in 05, yet it takes place in 04.
Well.
They deliberately say it's been like
6 years?
6 years after 6 years after Raccoon City, deliberately.
Which was 1998, yeah.
98. It's like 2, 3, and Veronica take place in 98. And then Umbrella, the official fall of Umbrella is in 03 because of Umbrella Chronicles. And then the year after that in 04 is when RE4 takes place.
Yeah, I was telling Smud about that before you hopped on. Like Umbrella, when he mentions Umbrella falling at the beginning of this video, and I said, yeah, Umbrella fell behind the scenes in between Code Veronica and 4, and it was the United States legal system that brought them down, not our heroes.
Litigation.
Yeah, litigation. Like, in fact, a bit of a fun fact: Albert Wesker was essentially the one that provided evidence against Umbrella.
Yeah, because he wanted the super soldier virus plot all to himself, and Umbrella was just in the way.
And it was funny because like the United States was actually going to lose the case against Umbrella because they were doing this all behind the scenes, and they were they put them on trial and they didn't have enough evidence, which I always thought was kind of funny. It's like, really, all those documents and files I find in the game were pretty much meaningless then? All right, cool.
Or maybe Wesker had the real ones that were incriminating, I guess.
Yeah, well, they said he like downloaded the hard drive from like Umbrella's hard drive, like their main.
He was there at the Russia base at Umbrella's Russia base. He was at the Russia base at the same time the BSAA took down at the same time Chris and Jill were there taking care of like the main thing. Like the actual takedown, and Wesker was there like in the background, like in some other part of the base, gathering the information to incriminate Umbrella, like from a litigation perspective.
But I was telling Smut, I said it's so funny. Like you have like every Resident Evil game up till Code Veronica, where the heroes say we have to take down Umbrella, we have to take the fight to them, and then they get taken down by the United States legal system.
Yeah, the entire series up to Code Veronica takes place in 98.
Yep.
And then the time skip to 4 was 6 years, and then the rest is history.
All right. Let's keep going.
Fully Resi 4 has pretty varied environments to make up for it, but framing everything you see in the exact same way does eliminate the personality a lot of past Resi environments were offered, with their tasteful, considered angles and different ways enemies could enter onto screen. Here the levels all look different, but feel similar. They're like different songs, but all with the same tempo. Now you could imagine a game where the camera angle remained out of the player's control while moving, and holding aim could bring the camera behind the player for them to survey and shoot. In fact, pre-release versions of Resi 4 seem to be aiming for that style, and honestly it does seem like the best of both worlds if it were to be implemented appropriately. The initial village mob attack at the start of the game really benefits from the camera staying behind Leon at all times. You feel kinda trapped and boxed in with these possessed lunatics, and some big long shot of the environment could undermine that by showing that the GameCube can't load in and isn't loading in that many enemies during gameplay relative to the size of the area.
This early part of the game was so good that it was literally the pre-release demo.
Yeah.
This pretty much summarizes almost the entire experience of the game in one encounter.
Yeah, this is the.
Go ahead.
And this is the concept of the vertical slice. You have all your major gameplay mechanics in the first 10 minutes of gameplay, and I guess he has like ladders he's knocking down. He's not just shooting; he's also using his knife, I think. And
yeah, this emphasizes more than any, the raid sections throughout the game. There's like at least like 2 or 3, including this one.
Yeah.
Well, I like this, opening scene in particular because like you're kind of underpowered. Like all you have is like a pistol. You can find a shotgun. You can find grenades. But you're still kind of like underpowered, and you've got like this big mob coming after you. So you kind of like have to fight, room to room, essentially, to get away from these people. And essentially you have to like, buy your time until like an invisible timer goes down and like the enemies all leave. So I like that. Like I like that your character can get overwhelmed early on. Whereas later on in the game, with all the upgrades and money and everything that you find, you can pretty much make your character a walking tank.
Well, that is the more progressive element of the game.
Whoop, sorry.
And it works. And it's like this section shows you like immediately. It's like it gives you like all the mainstays in terms of the weapons. The pistol you start with, the shotgun you get, the grenades you get, and this section proves like the series is evolving and you have to adapt or else.
I do seem to recall he has a series of not takedowns but like melee attacks. So there's the knife, there's the jump kick, there's the kick itself.
And you have to shoot them like at a certain point. Like you have to shoot them in the head. You can do like a spin kick,
right,
or you can shoot them in the knee and then like kick them. I think there's like a for like the cultists, like you can suplex them into the ground.
Yeah. Hitting all the enemies, hitting them in the head lets you do the spin kick. Hitting the villagers and the soldiers at the end in like the legs, it lets you do the straight kick. With the cultists is when the cultists you shoot in the leg, that lets you do the suplex, which is so notorious to the point where in the original GameCube release there was a specific part later in the game where you play as Ashley for like a survival section, and there's one point where you can lure an enemy to a door and you can suplex them as Ashley, which got patched out later.
Cool.
Ashley. Ugh.
The game gave you a lot of tools, whether it's weapons or your own like survival skills,
as opposed to just using a gun in the first few Resident Evil games. So,
well, you did have a knife, but it didn't get all that good until Code Veronica, and from there
they broke the hell out of that knife in Code Veronica. That knife was broken as hell.
And then
like you could kill an enemy like in 3 swipes with the knife in Code Veronica, whereas any other past Resident Evil game, people would just dump it in the item box as soon as they found the item box. They were just like, get rid of this thing. I hate it. Free up some inventory space.
And then in Resident Evil 4, they made it just part of the default moveset, and people really took a liking to it.
He mentions that in this video. He says it gets its own button in the game. It's not part of your inventory.
As it should have been from the beginning.
Right.
I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, I think that is the reason why it has its own button and everything, and it's part of like the core moveset. I think that was the intention from the beginning, but they couldn't do it until this game.
I think he mentions that. I don't know.
I think that was the reason. But don't quote me on that. But
no, I'm quoting you on that. I'm kidding.
All right.
But the initial section pretty much teaches you like the baseline for what you can expect for the rest of the game, and especially the raid sections here.
Okay.
The tighter viewpoint helps create the illusion you're being mobbed by a whole town. But for more settings where you're being stalked by 1 or 2 foes, or when trying to get across the scale of some vast environment or area or even enemy, throwing in some fixed angles during gameplay could have really elevated things. It's not that simple, of course. There's a reason you have to unlock this mode in Silent Hill by beating the game. This isn't an ideal way to experience that title. It's not a very polished mode. There's a lot of areas of the game that aren't prepared for you to be playing around with a view like this one. The amount of time it would take to curate a polished series of extra angles for Resi 4 would have to be considerable, not to mention having to work around the potential hardware limitations of the time to get the job done. Now, what's interesting is that Resi 4 could have made the changes to combat and camera that it does without making drastic changes to the level design. But that's what was done too. Rather than the levels being puzzle-like mazes, the game is a series of linear challenges where you pick up funny-looking keys to open doors, but this time almost exclusively in a straight line, one after the other. Now, without further ado, the Resi 4 flowchart. So why is Resi like this now? Well, you could argue the more complex shooting mechanics are good enough to warrant being the focus. Perhaps Capcom thought it would be a mistake to make players figure out where to go next, and potentially have them search in vain for a while, when we can just move them on to the next exciting set piece straight away.
Why? That's what we were doing before this game anyway.
So...
Yeah.
That's mainly from the genre shift, which many people were fine with.
Is the reason why he titles this The Road to the Rocket Launcher is because the rocket launcher is right near the end?
Yes.
Yeah, you get the rocket launcher at the end of every Resident Evil game. It's like the BFG, essentially.
Yeah.
Except the recent ones, I think.
Okay, interesting.
I don't know about 7 and 8, but definitely every game up to.
Well, you know what I mean, but you know.
No, I know, but yeah. But yeah, so this like the linearity. I never heard anyone complain about the linearity.
Yeah.
At least on its own. It's mainly in comparison to previous games, but then again, that's the part of that is because the old formula was just getting that stale.
Cool.
Yeah.
The worry with that is that Resi 4 would become some kind of monotonous corridor shooter, but it avoids that by having such a large diversity of combat scenarios. RE4 is a set-piece machine. Every other room is presenting you with a new setup for this mob, crowd control style of combat, and it just keeps going and going and going. You have these arena-like areas with multiple places to stand your ground. How about one with elevated vantage points? How about a swamp with different elevations? How about a confined space with really powerful enemies? What if you have to stand your ground in a tiny boat? What if we made you attack a castle defended with catapults, or navigate this room, but now re-navigate it with this guy on the turret? What if you're fighting on skylifts? In a gladiator arena, a besieged house. How about we have you defend a friend from a sniper's viewpoint? How about a hedge maze infested with killer dogs? How about a cage fight with a blind berserker? What about a different giant scorpion suspended over a chasm, whatever this is? Donkey Kong. What's great is that areas that don't have a specific unique gimmick usually still have a distinct layout, with interesting different vantage points to take advantage of, and unique ways enemies can approach you. It's like a weird dream game. You're never getting bored because the fundamentals are rock solid, and you're constantly being given something original to use them against. I can see why backtracking or getting lost interrupting this would have been vetoed. The game could have...
Yeah, this sounds just like not the concept of Nier Automata, where the creator wanted to give you a different experience every level and would focus more on the exploration or the combat, or maybe you're dodging bullet hells more often, but they wanted to make the game different, even with the mechanics being pretty much the same, and trying to present difficult puzzles every level in a different way. So that sounds good. That's how you should make games. Yeah.
Yeah.
Difficult. Yeah, right.
As opposed to, we have the fire level now. We have the ice level in like JRPGs or whatever. So
I mean, they do kind of have that in this game, but it's so few and far between, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
And he mentions in this video the puzzles are like pretty much a joke, really.
They kind of are, but once you figure them out, you don't forget this illusion.
Right.
Yeah.
It's always the big mysterious mansion with all the secret entrances and weird keys and whatever.
The whole thing with the past Resident Evils was like, you go to the left side of the mansion to get a key to open a door on the right side of the mansion to get an item that you need on the left side of the mansion.
Yeah.
Here in Resident Evil 4, it's just like you're constantly moving forward.
Right.
Yeah, it's like I'll grant him that it was definitely more interesting design to give you that little extra freedom. It's like you want to go this way or that way back in the old formula of RE. But again, the genre shift kind of like I wouldn't say restricted certain things. I'd say like streamlined and confined them a bit more, because you technically do have like the maze like element, just with more room to room than instead of like more overarching like in the old games. But it still works to a degree.
Yeah, and like elements I hated in RE4 were like, like right here you have on screen, you have Ashley tagging along with you. So now you constantly have to keep your eye on her so that she doesn't get grabbed by one of the enemies. I mean, there are certain locations like where you can like tell her to go hide, and she'll stay there while you clear out, the entire map or that section of the map. And then you can you'll press a button, you can actually whistle for her to come, back to you like a dog. And then I think Resident Evil 4 was like the one that started the whole, siege, mission thing, where it's like, okay, we're going to put you in this one location. You can't leave, and you have to kill every single person that comes into the building until an invisible timer runs out, and the game progresses.
Yeah, that's what I'm mentioning earlier. Like the raid sections, like early in the village, and then in the house with Luis, and then
that's what I was talking about. That section
exactly. It's like, and then later with the switch that you honestly let Ashley do it because you're the only one that can shoot.
I hate that map. I think they call it the water room. The water room. I hate that room. I hate it.
Yeah, but there's another one much later where you Ashley tries to power up a certain a machine to
the wrecking ball.
A wrecking ball. That one's awful too. I don't see anyone talk about the wrecking ball room nearly as much as the water room. They're both garbage.
I always found it weird, like the wrecking ball one. It's like, who will operate it, Leon or Ashley? And I'm like, I'm the one with the gun.
Yes, always Ashley. And again, and to be fair to the water room, you at least have a lot of space to work with.
Oh God, I hated the water room. I always hid in that one room. The one room at the bottom of the stairs. You know the one
Everyone
I'm talking about. Yeah, I hid in there the whole time.
Everyone does it. That's how cheap it is. And again, the water room is another example of the. I don't know if he's going to mention later, but the whole the dynamic difficulty where after a certain point there's two archers on top levels of the room. After a certain point, if you keep sucking, they are despawn permanently.
Oh,
you never noticed that, did you?
I haven't played RE4 in a while, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's been a while.
Let's keep going.
Being less linear, giving you the option to do one path or another, more here and there. But that kind of non-linearity, where it's just a question of rolling the dice to decide what path to do first, is less interesting to me than trying to make informed decisions about how to get somewhere and how to sweep a location efficiently. That's what made the non-linearity present in past Resis compelling. And what's interesting is that Resi 4 does still have that kind of experience, sometimes, but in isolated bite-sized chunks. Take this early segment where you're thrown into a kind of self-contained arena with different elevations and ways to get around. The door on the other side will only open if you collect 2 pieces of an emblem hidden separately in this self-contained area. Meanwhile, enemies descend on you from all angles, and you may not have the resources or skill at this early stage to stand your ground and take them all out. So you're having to quickly make decisions about which paths to take back and forth across this area to get the 2 emblem pieces and make it to the other side. You want to take paths where there aren't a lot of foes to block you, where there's good spots to take out a few, while keeping an eye on areas of the environment you can leverage against the mob, like high ledges or explosive barrels. It's like the experience of a map in classic RE, shrunken down to a more compact, hyper-aggressive format, where you're making decisions and plans that used to take minutes to execute, now back-to-back in seconds. This scenario may sound like a typical one for an action game, but given your restrictive movement, how hard enemies hit, and the sheer number of them, it gives every decision made, no matter how quick, a weight, analogous to some degree to the choices we were forced to make in past games. You're holding back overwhelming opposition while trying to navigate a cramped series of halls, while collecting keys, with good preparation playing a significant role in your success. That's pretty resi, even if here it's contained to more hyperactive, bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, they were still able to preserve the spirit of the old horror elements of Resident Evil while also incorporating more of the action.
Yep.
The balance they were able to strike with that in Resident Evil 4, at least for the most part, it was a very good balance. It's especially for their first attempt at trying to incorporate this much action into the Resident Evil formula.
Yeah, and then you play the game again on New Game Plus, and it's like you keep everything that you had at the end of the first game, at the end of your first save.
Well, that's balanced out by the fact that you're kicked into the highest difficulty.
Yeah, true, but still, it's like you get to keep everything that you had on with you at the end of the previous save.
Yeah, so even in New Game Plus, there is definitely that compromise, I guess you can call it that. You keep everything you had before, and if you were fully decked out by the time you escaped on the speedboat,
yep.
Yeah,
if you made smart upgrading decisions.
Smart upgrading decisions, they were able to play the game in such a way where you didn't use too many resources all the way to the end.
Yep.
And again, it's balanced out by the fact that if you do decide to go for New Game Plus, you keep everything, but you're kicked directly into the highest difficulty with no dynamic setting.
Right.
That's the real test.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're not collecting a couple of key items in an area you need to open a door, there's a lot of arenas in the game that are constructed like this, where you have to navigate a self-contained, winding series of paths that enemies start flooding, crisscrossing back and forth to press two buttons that open the door out, or activating something at one end that activates something back at the other end that opens the door out. The game could have perhaps done with more of these sort of segments, but you can tell there's a giddiness to experiment and try out the new combat system in all kinds of mad ways, now that said aiming can accommodate so many scenarios.
Nothing wrong with that.
Something I'd be very interested to know is at what point during development enemy drops were included, because frankly, out of every change this game makes, this is the biggest. It's what makes RE4 feel so different to play than prior games. Sometimes enemies drop items consistently, sometimes randomly, sometimes probably based on how well you're doing as part of some behind-the-scenes dynamic difficulty system to give you something you might quite urgently need. Point is, now you have a chance of taking out an enemy, and sometimes losing resources in the process, but other times gaining resources in exchange for the ones you spent. Ammunition is the only type of item that can't be purchased by using money, or trading in other items, giving you an even bigger incentive to face foes and potentially recoup some. This shifts the dynamic of play considerably, alongside a number of rooms that either lock you in until enemies have been defeated, or make it very hard to leave without defeating them. Combat has now become the best first resort on almost all occasions, which didn't used to be the case. And that is a big difference. More than the camera angle or aiming system. Thing is, enemy drops and locking you in rooms with enemies is effectively mandatory in a linear RE game. Why kill enemies in previous games? Slipping past them is usually a risk, yes, but it would be far more tempting if you knew you weren't coming back there. A big reason to clean out enemies was so that you could make return trips stress-free. If a Resi game were linear like RE4, but you weren't encouraged in so many ways to fight enemies, it often being potentially a net benefit for your wallet and inventory even if the doors aren't locked, running away and slipping through to the next area would be a decent strategy to rely on. My mind goes back to this tunnel at the back end of RE2. Notice how tight the hallway is here. The game wants you to fight the enemies, but you know you're never coming back here, so you're squeezed in to make slipping past difficult. Elements like protecting Ashley at certain points also prevent you from slipping through quickly, as you'll need to protect her and make sure she gets to the other side safely too. You're going to want to clean out the area so she can get across without taking damage. Question is though, could you make a more exploratory RE game like the classics with pickups dropping from enemies? Well, you could, but
Didn't 7 and 8 do that anyway?
I don't remember. It's been a long time since I played 7 and 8, to be honest. Yeah, I know 8 drops. Yeah, they dropped a lot of like items. I think like money and they brought like in the same vein as like RE4, like they drop like money and resources, things like that.
Yep, I do recall running out of ammo quite a bit in the first game, just because you're exploring half the time. And in order to explore, you have to kill a bunch of zombies, and then, you just don't have any more bullets. And you're like, what do you do?
Well, you're not supposed to waste them all.
Yeah, it's like every bullet counts. You're like, oh.
And again, if I remember correctly, back in RE2, that tunnel section that Leon and Ada are in, I believe that's Leon B.
Mm.
And if you really look around, I think it's possible for Leon to be the one that gets the automatic weapon in the police station, and you could just save that up for that hallway.
Well, that was actually a really good dynamic choice in Resident Evil 2. Like, you go into the armory, I think it was, the armory and the police armory, and you can open up a locker, and there's 2 items inside. There's the submachine gun, which he was using in that clip, and there's a hip. The
extra spaces.
It gives you extra inventory spaces, and the game's like, okay, you can either take this or you can take that, or you can take both of them. Now, if you do that, like in Leon's A scenario, if you come back as Claire in the B scenario, like say you took both of them are gone now.
No.
Whereas if you only took one of them, the item that you didn't take would be there. I was like, okay, that's actually pretty cool. I like that. Because it actually makes you feel like, these 2 people are in the same universe, which they kind of fucked up with the remake, but, we'll not go there. We're not going to go there.
I do remember that you can't take both. It's just one or the other.
I think you could. I did in the Nintendo 64 version, so.
Greedy bastard. Left Leon with nothing, did you?
I was playing as Leon.
And then another dynamic choice is I can think it's either in 2 different parts of the police station, and A scenario could close the blast doors for one of those 2 parts, and then in B scenario, the shutters. In B scenario, even though you close the shutters, by the time
the other person gets there.
By the time the other person gets there, the shutters just break off completely, and there's even more zombies in there.
Yeah, and they tell you that, like in the first time when you close them, they're like, they'll say like it'll hold, but it won't hold for long. And you can see like sparks coming off of it too. So
that and also having the choice of one or the other.
Yeah. Also, that tunnel that Leon and Ada were in, like if you go to the other end of that tunnel, you get an upgrade for your shotgun. So it is worth it, to go down that other end of the hallway.
Yeah, and that's why people usually when they do clear a Leon B, they leave the submachine gun for Leon specifically for that section, like he showed in the video. And that is one of the things that's like. That's one of the things that RE2, and to an extent RE3 did a lot better than the first game. It's like having the different versions of events. It's like with the dynamic choices in 2 and then 3, you could pick one option over the other. Which I think one of the last choices is a canonical event where you have the choice of, you're at the bridge, you have the choice of either pushing Nemesis off or jumping off yourself. I forget which option it is that leaves Nikolai alive. I think it's you jumping off.
Okay. I think you can actually fight him too. Like if he's in the helicopter, I think you can try and shoot at him.
You're supposed to fight him because reports, if I remember correctly, reports in Umbrella Chronicles confirm that he survived the Raccoon City incident. Okay. So that choice is a deliberate canonical outcome. I think if you push him off, that's when he's killed by Nemesis. For that choice, you have to jump off so that he keeps going, and then you encounter Nikolai instead because he hijacks the chopper that was left for you to escape the city, and it's also canon that Barry's the one that picks up Jill and Carlos at the end.
And Resident Evil 1 remake, as much praise as it gets, like it messes up its own lore most of the time because, like, you know, you play as Chris, you lose your gun running to the mansion, and you can find Jill's gun later to use as your own weapon. Whereas if you play as Jill, she keeps her gun the whole time. So it's like, wait, how does that work? Like, which is the scenario? And I got to tell you, you know, Smud, as much crap as you give the Mass Effect 3 endings, Resident Evil 1 Remake has got nothing on Mass Effect 3.
Well, Resident Evil 1 in general, both versions, because the canonical outcome is all 4 survivors make it out of the mansion explodes.
That's the continuity, yes. That's the continuity.
Yeah, exactly, because, well, no, what I'm saying is that no version of the game lets you achieve the actual canon outcome.
That's right. There's 12 endings. There's 12 endings. 6 for Chris, 6 for Jill. Good, normal, and bad. None of them are canon.
Yeah, the mansion.
None of the endings are canon.
Nothing. The real canon is all 4 make it out. Wesker dies, in quotes, dies. The mansion explodes. The tyrant gets killed.
Yep.
Brad picks everyone up, gives the rocket launcher to whoever you're playing as, and that's it. And especially Umbrella Chronicles and later retellings of RE1 confirm all of this.
Yep. But yeah, that's like so wild. I didn't even know that until like a couple weeks ago. Like, none of the Resident Evil 1 remake endings are canon. It's like, how did you guys screw that up?
Unless we get an RE Engine remake of Resident Evil 1 that just makes everything one scenario where you switch between the two characters, and that's how you get the canon ending.
I guess, but you know, it's like
I would say
they don't even address it. That's the weird thing too. Capcom's never even addressed it.
I mean, it can.
They never acknowledged that they fucked up. Essentially,
I mean, and it can be possible to like condense both playthroughs into one playthrough that you can just switch between the two sides and just like retcon. As I mean, not retcon too much. Retcon things in such a way where all the major stuff happens, but also everything that the rest of the series says happened can happen.
Right.
Yeah. Let's get back to the video, though.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think it would diminish the intended effect those games were trying to elicit. There, the devs wanted the player to dread walking into a room and potentially stumbling on an enemy. They didn't want the player to get excited when they encountered a new enemy because defeating them might involve a potential reward. Or at least be so confident that kills will eventually result in a net gain of resources that you'll just throw down without thinking about it. Of course, item dropping enemies that are powerful enough to warrant making a tough choice about whether to engage or not are a different matter. The series has had those before, but now that defeated common enemies provide such a surplus of goodies, when fighting them, that choice barely exists. In a game with enemy pickups where you're gonna potentially not be trying to avoid said enemies, it makes some sense to just put all of those foes in a big line instead of across an open map. In titles like previous Resis where you often wanted to avoid enemies, you need a lot more to engage with outside of the combat, like solving a maze or puzzles, hunting around for key items and resources, and managing it all. RE4 hones in on its combat as the focus. It's something you're gonna want to do and a lot of the time have to do. And that means other elements get a reduced significance. Key items no longer take up inventory space, and puzzles are so basic they can barely be considered more than break time between fights. I wonder what came first. Did the linear levels inspire the need to incentivize combat further with drops? Or did wanting to reward the player more like that to get them to engage with the new combat make the linear setup make more sense?
What the heck am I looking at? What are these two things?
It's like no, the question is, did the linearity influence the combat, or did the combat influence the linearity?
Oh, and you're looking at like you have like the map on the left there, and then you have like the gold, which is the money resource that you find in the game, and then like an ammo box.
Okay.
It's like the two main pillars of the gameplay, both which is like the linear level design and the combat. It's like which one influenced the other. That's the question.
Right.
And we still don't know.
Or was there simply an overall effort to up the pace of Resident Evil, and more complex shooting, linear levels, and enemy drops were all introduced independently, and they just so happened to work really well together? Either way, they do. All of these elements complement each other well, and even though we lose a lot of decision-making without the maze, and focus on picking wisely which enemies to fight or circumvent, you get...
Never fight that guy's head on. Never.
Yeah, he was doing it wrong.
Yeah, let me
Complement
just
each other well, and even
before
though
we get going. Yeah, this guy, like his parasite is on his back.
Yeah,
And
his weak point.
I think he's called the Novistador.
Yeah,
which is Roughland translation.
and he's blind.
Yeah, the rough translation of that is that he can't see.
Yep.
It's like his plot. He can't see. The slightest sound that sets him off, like alerts him to your location. But that's balanced out by the fact that his plagas is right on his back.
Yep.
So
you can
lure
easily
him.
trick him.
You see the bell like just up above to the left of his head. That's that bell right there. You see it?
Yep.
That's one of the things you're supposed to use to like lure him over there. And he has the potential to destroy it altogether if he goes for it. But that is meant to give you enough time to shoot the plagas on his back.
Yep.
But going back to the design.
Lose a lot of decision making without the maze and focus on picking wisely which enemies to fight or circumvent, you get a lot of choice back with the new trading system those pickups play into. In this game, you can purchase weapons, weapon upgrades, weapon attachments, maps, and health items, but no ammo, as I said. Cash can be dropped by enemies found in the environment, or received after trading in items. Obviously, you need to pick and choose where to invest your money, but what really holds this shop system together is a lack of item boxes. You can only keep what you're carrying on you. Not everything about RE4 is trying to streamline out dilemmas. You can't buy every weapon and stash them somewhere between save points. Buying or upgrading a weapon isn't just a commitment because you've used some cash, but because if there comes a point where you don't want it anymore, you'll have to sell it back at a loss and lose any upgrades it had. This incentivizes coming up with a playstyle and sticking to it. The fact that you can sell practically anything means that if you really do want to concentrate on just a couple of weapons, you can funnel other things you won't be using back into upgrading them or to beef yourself up in other ways. There are so many approaches, and it makes the game even more replayable. The inability to buy ammo does limit your approach a little, though. An initial appraisal presents some good reasons why you can't. Aside from using this vital resource to encourage behavior elsewhere in the game, you could imagine being able to exchange all your items for a mountain of bullets, making a joke out of difficult segments. But that argument doesn't really hold up to scrutiny. If upgrading a weapon can refill its ammo, and you can purchase one-time use rocket launchers that can one-hit kill a boss, I don't think offering some expensive ammo to purchase at the merchant would undermine the game's balance as it is. If you upgraded, say, the shotgun more than the pistol, I don't think it would hurt to be able to trade pistol ammo in toward some shotgun ammo, if the shotgun ammo were to be priced high enough to make it a purchase not carried out lightly. Now, Resident Evil 4 is still an intense, nerve-wracking experience with a lot of decisions to make, where you flow in and out of feelings of intense pressure and intense catharsis. So in that regards, it follows on from previous games quite well. But how scary is it? Well, not as scary. With increased enemy numbers and encouragement to take them on, it's hard to feel as unnerved when you can rack up so many kills in such a short amount of time, no matter how grim the level looks. But there are some uniquely spooky moments that do work. At one point, you get sent into these tunnels with a powerful monster stalking you. You activate a lift that's going to take a while to arrive, and this is when it decides to come down from the rafters and chase you. It's very hard to take out, so you can either stall it with these ice canisters until the lift arrives, or use your best weapons to eliminate it.
That right there is all you should really do with that thing.
Yeah.
Freeze it, rocket launcher. There you go.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Which is part of the freedom that the like certain combat sections give you throughout the game. That he's kind of like
yeah. Hell, they even give you a rocket launcher that you can find early on, and you have to like hold on to it.
In the not early on, but in like halfway into the castle, if I remember correctly.
Right, but I'm saying like 20 minutes prior to that, you find that rocket launcher, in a glass case, and it's like, this is really cool. And you could either sell that or you can keep it, but you have to manage your inventory around that because it's such a large item.
That's the one I mean. That's the only one.
Right.
So here's the The Giga Chat, thanks for the tip, sir. Every time one of these channels makes a graph of a model to show what they mean when they describe a game, they always put a dildo with an arrow pointing to a bottle of hair gel and expect you to understand the model as if it means anything.
Well, that's just a coincidence. Part of that's just part of the Road to the Rocket Launcher series, where that's shown, like, for all the other Resident Evil games, to give a general idea of the possible paths that someone could take in those earlier games where it is more non-linear. So to just see the one here without the context of all the other videos he's done on the series where he shows much more complex graphs for those, it's like, yeah, it does look a bit too simple on its own, but that's just because that's been the way he's able to show, like, the different paths in the earlier games.
Right.
Because of the non-linearity.
And we're not talking about linearity from, like, was it Final Fantasy 12 or 13, like the lightning stories? We're not talking about that linearity for level design. We're talking about there's only one path, but the path could be winding. It could be this left, right, center.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not, like, designed to be literally linear. It just is a straight path in terms of connecting rooms and pathways.
Right.
Yes.
And Resident Evil is pretty linear. It's like you're going to end up where you're going to end up. There's no like, well, if you'd gone through this door, you know, you would have had an easier time. Like, I think the only time they do that is Resident Evil 4, where he showed it earlier with the lever, like, you know, the left path or the right path.
Yeah, after
if you
the
choose
house.
one path, you get a ton of, like, human enemies. If you choose the right path, if you choose the other path, you get the giant that you have to fight. Yeah, you have to fight him instead. And you can actually go back and go through the other path that you didn't take.
And get everything you missed as well.
Exactly.
So you're given choice, but but that doesn't mean that if you pick one or the other, that they lead to, just because they
It all
lead
leads to the same place.
Yeah, but no, what I'm saying is just because they lead to the same place doesn't mean that the choice doesn't matter. It definitely does matter. It's like one or the other, especially if you know what you're getting into. It's like, do you want to go against the villagers in the arena first, or do you want to go through the straight path?
And they don't tell you either. They're like, either you either choose left or right. That's it. They don't tell you, like, this one's going to be harder, this one's going to be easier.
Yeah, left is the Ganados, right is El Gigante.
Yep.
This is a scenario where you really feel like you're at a serious disadvantage compared to a lot of other parts of the game. The other big one is the first appearance of the Regenerators. Their almost giggle-like panting noises are extremely unnerving, and the jittering of the Iron Maiden variants dial up that unease another notch. The way they flop about and move unnaturally like a fish out of water is very unsettling. Their introduction works especially well, though, because that initial reveal is given sufficient build-up to put you on edge before the first one makes an appearance. Suddenly the game goes all quiet, throwing you off after so much action. You see one lying on a slab out of commission, and when it starts coming to, it's out of sight. So you get to hear the horrible noises it makes as it wakes up and starts walking towards the door that you're on the other side of.
Yeah, the Regenerators, this game's equivalent of the Hunters and Lickers from the previous games. This is basically the definitive top tier enemy of this game.
Oh yeah, and they don't even give you, like, the proper tool to fight them at first. Like, you have to, like, you know, avoid them at first just to get the thermal scope for your sniper rifle.
Yeah, exactly. And you're given the option to go out of your way to go to the cryo chamber room and defrost the storage unit so you can get that thermal scope. Which, by the way, speaking of the sniper rifle, semi-auto, top tier, fight me.
I use the bolt action.
For the damage boost, of course.
Of course.
It just gets disorienting.
Yeah. The reload, yeah.
Yeah, it's the reload animation.
They're hard to take down, too, requiring multiple precision strikes before they get too close and absolutely destroy you. So the game hypes them up this way for good reason. Enemy designs in general have taken a twisted step up from the past few games.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was also going to say it's like the Regenerators, like being the definitive top tier enemy of Resident Evil 4. that that also represents like the original survival horror aspect of the older games, reasserting itself back into RE4 later in the game, just to increase the tension.
Yeah,
near the
and
end of the game.
plus they're throwing you an enemy that you can't kill through like conventional means. Everything that you face up until prior to that is like, relatively easy. Like, you shoot the villagers until they're dead. You shoot the El Giante until it's dead. You shoot the blind guys. I forget what you said, Ginga, what they were called.
The Novistadors.
The Novistadors, like you essentially have to trick them, but you can still just pump bullets into them. With the regenerators, however, you pump bullets into them, that just slows them down temporarily.
Especially when the game gives you an obvious solution to taking them out, but common sense tells you not to go that route, and that's the rocket launcher.
Well, yeah, but
well, no, because it's like it places you. It's like the moment you realize, but wait, the rocket launcher could take it down. Yeah, but it's expensive, so it gives
you only get one
shot.
shot.
Yeah, I like that little bit of that little forethought where it's the best possible solution, but common sense kicks in and like tells you no, it's not. That would hold you back so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's impractical. That's why the main solution, the actual main solution, is the thermal scope, like we said earlier.
Right.
But and that it represents like, and again, like the whole horror aspect of the classic RE reasserting itself at the end of this game, just to like tie everything more neatly in terms of the rest of the series. And it just how do I say it? It's like it just is able to like tie it, like bring everything full circle, you could say. It's like it goes from like the more action focus, and then it brings back the horror elements with the regenerator and the other things, and even the jump scare from the incinerator earlier in that section. That is just tries to like intermingle more aspects of the series together, trying to combine the older aspects more closely with the newer elements introduced in this game.
Are you talking about the guy that was hiding in the oven?
In the oven, yes.
Oh my god, yeah, that scared the shit out of me the first time that happened.
Yeah, that's like the point I'm trying to make. Is like that horror aspect of Resident Evil. Yeah, for a decent amount of the game, or at least early on, it's not all that much there. But once you go deeper into the lab and like the core, like the roots of the series reassert themselves back into the game, and it has a decent payoff with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah, and plus the best thing about the regenerators too is they don't linger on them too long. They don't overstay their welcome. Like hey, we're gonna introduce this thing to you, the regenerators. You fight a couple of them, you manage to get away, or you can kill all of them, and then that's it. They're essentially done with. Like they don't become like the enemy that you face thereon after. Which I thought was good. Like they didn't overuse that enemy.
Yeah, not every enemy, but each enemy is introduced in part of its environment, and that's it. It's not coming
aside from the Ganados themselves, the baseline of the Plagas faction.
Right.
Everything else is part of where it is, and it stays there. Yes.
Yep.
Rather than different giant bugs or animals, we get Las Plagas parasites that come in a lot more grotesque shapes and sizes than the RE0 leeches. The way the exposed Plagas flail and sound is so disgusting.
Definitely plays into
and they
the
don't
horror
need
element.
The same music sting to kick in every time they appear to remind you they're dangerous. The regenerators and their spiked counterparts are the standout though when it comes to scary enemies in this game. So it's interesting that after your first encounter with them, you then play Crane Machine with some baddies. This is why it would kind of be hard to do a play-by-play of this entire game for you all. The title is such a random assortment of tones and activities that there are very few prolonged sections where we settle into just one rhythm or mood and build on it. In a way, I kind of respect the gall to just play it so fast and loose and seemingly not care to build up any one consistent theme for too long. It definitely stops the game from getting boring. Every 10 minutes presents a new type of challenge or scenario, and when looked at like that, it's hard not to be impressed. The game can keep that up for 12 to 15 hours. By the time you're trading blows on an island with military infected and trying to outmaneuver regenerators, it feels like a fortnight ago you were fighting amongst cows and chickens in some farm. The series adds these button prompt challenges. During gameplay or not, buttons will occasionally flash on the screen, and you'll have to quickly hit them to get the best outcome. I'm in two minds about this inclusion. One thing I like about it is that these prompts have a chance of
you die if you don't press the right buttons,
as well as during gameplay. And the first time you play, there's no way to tell you've entered a cutscene that will have one of these challenges till it happens. They make the cutscenes feel like more of an extension of the gameplay. And look, there aren't many games where I was holding my controller paying attention intently during cinemas when Resi 4 was new. On the other hand, sequences where you have to mash a button don't work for me. I've already passed the timing prompt by hitting the button the first time. The rest is just busy work. One thing that gets a welcome makeover is the inventory system. Instead of 6 to 8 pockets for one item each, you get a grid-based case where you can maneuver items of different sizes around in. It's rewarding to organize your inventory effectively to squeeze out the most room possible. But the best thing to me about this new system is that it lets you organize things in a way that's personal to you, how you would rather see it be laid out. You get to interact with your equipment in a more tactile way by picking each item up and displaying it where you'd prefer. Because of this, I feel a closer attachment to my equipment than before, which is cool in a survival game all about picking the right tools. Speaking of inventory, one thing I'd say is almost an objective improvement is that now the knife has its own dedicated button, so you don't have to go into the menu and switch out your gun for it. This really should have been present in the older games. Even if those games had allowed for this, the penalty of losing an inventory slot to the knife still could have been present, even if it's not in RE4. Giving it its own button just saves time from having to pause the action. That said, even at the time of release, the lack of an option to switch to any other weapon without pausing felt off. It's just clunky with how combat is so encouraged now relative to past titles. This is one way in which Resi 4 stays faithful to past entries that feels misguided. Perhaps it just wasn't possible to load in a large selection of guns fast enough for on-the-fly weapon switching through your whole arsenal, but you'd think they could have at least pulled it off for the grenades, since asking you to pause and switch out your gun for one feels especially clunky. It's even worse if you use your last grenade, because Leon is just left awkwardly standing around unarmed. What has changed now is the save system. There are no ink ribbons and you can save as many times as you want.
Thank the
There's
Lord.
even checkpoints which have been added between typewriters. Honestly, it makes some sense. This is a linear game now. The choice of whether to use an ink ribbon or not was informed a lot by which potential route you might be taking next, and assessing how dangerous it might be to go down. Whether you know or maybe think there'll be a lot of enemies coming up. Here the only path is forward, and there are definitely going to be enemies down it. The story Resi 4 tells starts really strong. I like the bold decision to end the Umbrella plotline, as it sets the story off on a mysterious, uncertain note, and the characters introduced in the village allow for a fun dynamic. But that eerie mystery presented in the opening areas soon dissipates and swaps itself out for comedy villain antics and a main villain who's given not much texture or motivation, but also isn't enigmatic enough to be entertaining despite that.
Yeah, he really hammed it up.
Yeah, well, then again, that also plays into the larger ethos that the game plays into, the whole going back to the roots of the series in terms of the B-movie feeling.
Yeah, exactly.
Which honestly, I'm not going to forgive it 100%. I'll say that it's definitely a double-edged sword, because it can be definitely be a benefit and a detriment at the same time if you don't play it right.
Right.
Yeah. And you know, when you start RE4, like in the village area, like they do play it pretty straight. You know, like, you know, the story. And then as soon as you get to the castle, as soon as they introduce Salazar, holy crap. You know, he's just calling you up on your own radio to talk shit at you. You know, he's constantly talking down to you, no pun intended. You know, it's like, enough, man. I get it. You're short, you know, and you're constantly standing in a place that towers over me. I get it.
Yeah, by the time of the castle, they play it a little less straight, while at the same time just straight enough so that you can still take Salazar seriously as a threat, but also enjoy the performance.
I never took took him as a threat. I'm like, man, if I could, I would punt you across the room. You know, the only thing that was holding me back was his 2 bodyguards, of course.
You can insta-kill him with the rocket launcher. Is that good enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can get him into his second phase and just rocket launcher him in the face. And,
I know, but
yeah,
just cheesing it like that is just, it ain't worth it.
But yeah, it's like Osmond Saddler is I'll happily admit he's not that much of a memorable villain.
He's not
on a general perspective, but it's like,
he's hammy.
He is definitely hammy.
Yeah, he's hamming it up, And I've always wanted to know like what his like. I mean, I don't desperately need to know, but I always kind of like wanted to know like what was his role like in the village? Was he like the minister of the church or something? Did he work in the mines? That's how he knew about the plagas. Like, I want to know like what's his story.
He was definitely
he just comes out of nowhere.
He was definitely involved from a very early stage in the discovery of the plagas. That's how he took it. That's how he came up with the plan to take advantage of the plagas and infiltrate the U.S. presidency with it.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, like, Sadler isn't that much of a memorable villain, but then again, they do still play it well enough to the point where not only you can still enjoy him when he's on screen, at least some of the time, but also RE5 then tried to ham Wesker up, and it failed spectacularly.
Yeah.
So that's how a lot of people went back to RE4 and gave Osmond Sadler a second look. It's like, okay, it's not all that bad. It could have been better, but
yeah, they go back to RE4. It's like, listen, Sadler, I want to apologize for everything I said about you. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
No. I know you're joking, but to go on with my point, it's like it was. I mean, I'll be fair. It wasn't out of pity either. It's just that's what made people more willing to give it a second look and appreciate it a little more. But which honestly, yeah. And to go back on the earlier point on the gameplay, yeah, the QTEs. This and God of War 1 was where that started.
Oh yeah, the QTEs. Yeah, this is when it started for like the other Resident Evil games, 5 and 6 specifically.
5 and 6.
Just
Well, not just the QTEs, but also mainly the fact that because Resident Evil 4 was so successful, it was in a misguided attempt to believe that, in a misguided belief of action being the definitive future of the series, that's the direction they went with, even though the action wasn't the only thing we liked about the game.
Yeah, so that's why I always felt Resident Evil 4 was like the most divisive of the series. It's like it was the beginning of like the action-oriented Resident Evil.
Well, but what makes it even worse is that it's not even the game's fault, because it's a fantastic game. The problem was Capcom misinterpreting what made it a success.
Well, I think they were just like following like the trends, like, hey, following the trend of like the whole, action-oriented game. They were moving away from like the horror elements of the previous games.
Well, at the same time, they didn't really move too much along. Again, like the final section on the island is definitive classic Resident Evil in a lot of parts. And again, it's like specifically like the action third-person shooter thing. Again, like I said earlier in the Smudcast, they started that specific one. Like the general action orientation of the gaming industry from this point on, yeah, they were in a general sense following making action the focus, but again, this was early enough where you can still forgive it because it was more experimental than anything. So, not entirely Resident Evil 4's fault, I will admit. Again, because this, in terms of Resident Evil specifically, this is the first of its kind.
Right.
And again, like Ego Dreamer says in the chat, Shinji Mikami jumping ship also didn't help either. Yeah, he did. If I remember correctly, yeah, he did leave development like halfway, didn't he? After they rebranded the early prototype as a DMC1.
Yeah, Resident Evil 4 went through so many different revisions. Like you mentioned earlier, it gave, like, the earliest one gave birth to Devil May Cry, the first game.
Yes.
Then even Leon's early design is essentially Dante.
Yeah, exactly. It's like to the point where it because DMC1 was split off into its own thing away from Resident Evil 4, that created a misconception where the legendary Dark Knight costume is, a lot of people think it's Sparta, when in actuality that was back when it was Resident Evil 4. That's what Tony Redgrave was going to look like 10 years after that game version of the game started, because the game was going to originally take place over the span of 10 years, and that was going to be Tony at the end of the game.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of, like, even in a rebrand like that, there's at least a couple misconceptions that come from that.
Alrighty.
There's no one who manages to get under your skin via gameplay consistently throughout the title, the way something like Nemesis did either. Some characters feel like they're from different games altogether. Luis is a fun, charismatic side character that contrasts well with Leon, but he enters and leaves the game before Krauser is even introduced. A super edgy ex-partner of Leon's turned rival who shows up
a literal
to
nobody.
build a relationship with the player. It definitely feels like the plot was rushed after years of this game going through different iterations. Leon being infected ends up not amounting to much at all other than a few cutscenes, and has no effect on gameplay.
Yeah, they should have played that
like
up
a missed
more.
opportunity. For some wild reason, they decided to have Leon find out Ada was still alive between titles, when that could have...
I mean, Leon being infected, would that not have been a repeat of Resident Evil 3 though?
Well, it was different because in Resident Evil 3, Jill was essentially like knocked out for like a week when she got infected.
Yeah.
Whereas Leon, on the other hand, he was a liability. You know, like you saw like in that clip, like he attacked Ada, and you know she managed to subdue him. You know, by kicking him in the nuts. You know.
Yes, well, knife to the leg first, and then kick to the nuts.
Right, but still,
but yeah, I'll admit that. Okay, well, looking at it again, yeah, but I still stand that it kind of would have been a repeat. But the problem I do realize is that Jill being infected in RE3 was just one glorified excuse to have RE2 still happen there.
Right. Plus, I heard somewhere that like if you take too long in the game, like when you try to like cure Leon with that laser, if you like take too long in the game, like it'll actually end up killing him.
Really?
Because I don't know like the exact amount of time it needs to pass, but like if you take too long playing the game, or at least in the original GameCube version, Leon will die, I believe. When you try to get the parasite out of him. But yeah, like I said, I don't remember like how long it takes for that to happen.
I mean, I'm looking it up right now, and I don't see anything for that.
Really, I thought there was. I remember.
I literally looked up Resident Evil 4 Leon infected death, and I'm not seeing anything for the lab section.
I thought there was like a thing, like if you took too long in the game, like you could actually like die, like he dies while Ashley's trying to get it out of him.
Maybe that's something that might have been something that ended up on the cutting room floor.
Maybe, yeah. But I thought that was like in the game, but
because maybe that might have been something they planned but cut out, because that essentially, if you sucked at the game, that essentially would have been a hard lock.
Yeah, well, I mean, like in a sense of like oh yeah, that is true. It would hard lock the game. You'd be pretty much screwed. Yeah.
If you're playing the game for the first time, you don't know what the hell to do, and the time
taking your time.
Yeah, if you were taking too much time to do any of the more complex stuff in the game, that would essentially be. I mean, that would be grounds for a Resident Evil style alternate ending, but I don't think a lot of people would have been okay with that.
No, well, you remember Resident Evil Gaiden, right?
Yeah. Ego Dreamer mentioned it in the chat just now.
Yeah, I'm not looking at chat right now, but for those who don't know, Resident Evil Gaiden was made way before Resident Evil 4. I think it was early 2000s, I believe, and it was for the Game Boy Advance.
I'll double check release date just in case.
It was like Game Boy Advance and
color.
Oh, Game Boy Color. I'm sorry, I apologize. In that, I'll skip all the rest of it. In that ending, 2001. Thank you. Leon dies off screen. He gets off screen to death. And and he gets replaced by a creature that looks exactly like him. And the only reason you can tell it's a fake is because in the ending cutscene you can see like a cut on his neck that's bleeding green blood.
Yeah.
And fans hated that so much. Now keep in mind, this was before Resident Evil 4. This was before Leon became so popular.
This was right after. This was relatively speaking. This was right after DMC1.
Right, and the fans hated it so much that Capcom says, "Okay, that is not canon anymore. That game is not canon to the main series."
Yeah, when they got
because the fans hated it so much.
Yeah, when they decided to like organize like the sequence of events in preparation for RE4, they snubbed that one out. And DMC1 was in late August, and Gaiden was in mid-December. So like months, I think, 4 months after DMC1.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
Resident Evil's canon is so off the wall if you don't know what is canon and what is not.
Right.
Jesus.
Yeah, and Operation Raccoon City is like the worst of it too.
I was just about to say, the less we talk about that one, the better. Because in that game, it means absolutely nothing. Because that game, and before we go back to the video, that game was built up so fucking much.
I bought it.
That game was built up so much to be a game that was non-canon from the start, so that it would give you the opportunity to massively change the canon storyline from 2 and 3.
Yeah, one of the missions in the game is you can kill Leon Kennedy. Like, you can assassinate him.
Yeah, at the very end. With no build-up.
Yep.
And especially right after the events of Resident Evil 2 itself, which is like just...
It was during the events of Resident Evil 2.
No, that choice, by the time of that choice, they had already gotten away from G. Birkin.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I never made it past the first boss in that game. Like, I ran out of ammo.
Because that was also, if I remember correctly, that might have been like in the middle of the second half of RE3 when they're given the choice with Leon. Because the main Umbrella Strike team does the events of Resident Evil 2, while the government sanctioned Echo Fox are doing the Resident Evil 3 side of the story.
Oh, okay.
And a little bit of 2 when the time skip happens with that
right.
RE2 is in.
Yeah. Yeah, and regarding the whole thing with Ada here, like he just mentioned, mentioning that like Ada was alive. I didn't really mind that when I played RE4. I was like, okay, he obviously learned that in between the games. Like, I didn't mind it.
Yeah, honestly, and also props for them getting Ada's original actress from PS1 RE2.
Yeah, good for them.
The only voice actor aside from Claire to be in more than one game.
Well, I don't know when he died, but the voice actor for Leon Kennedy in the original RE2 died in real life. Paul Haddad, I think his name was. He died at some point, which is why they changed voice actors. I think in RE4, wasn't it? It's not the original guy.
Yeah, Paul Haddad. He died. He died pretty much close to the start of the pandemic.
Oh, really?
April 11. Yeah.
Wow.
I don't think it was because of the pandemic, but
I thought he died like a while ago. Wow.
He died right at the start of it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't because of the changing games. It was just because.
Okay, I thought that was a while ago. God.
Yeah, because
I don't keep track of that sort of thing, but
I mean, it's just Googling it, whatever. But
right. But
honestly, pretty much the RE4 voice of Leon is pretty much the definitive one, honestly.
Oh, speaking of Resident Evil voices, Smud, do you recognize the voice of Wesker from Resident Evil 5?
Oh boy, yes.
Yeah, it's Legion. It's Legion.
It's hard to 2 and 3. It's hard to pick apart,
it's crazy.
But it is right. Yeah, you're right.
I know it's crazy. It's funny. I didn't know that either.
Well, before we go back to video, speaking of it, took me until like a couple months ago to realize that Liara's voice actress does Lightning in Final Fantasy.
Oh, you didn't know that?
Oh,
I didn't know that. No.
It was so obvious. Come on.
Obvious. You tell the guy that has never played Final Fantasy 13. You tell that it's obvious.
Well,
sure.
Obviously you've never played the game, but as soon as you hear her talk, you're like, "What?"
It's. I mean, it's the fact. It's also. I mean, I have heard her in Dissidia though, but I just never put it together because any time between Dissidia and Mass Effect was always too long for me to remember.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, no. Well, sometimes she was it Allie Hillis or Hills or I know it's Allie. She does this cute little thing with her voice sometimes, but other than that, it's pretty much the same. She doesn't have too much range, so she's easy to pick apart. With Legion, though, that's like he's behind a voice modulator,
right?
So it's tough. But then you listen to it, you're like, oh wait, that does kind of sound similar, but I just don't know who until you actually research and go, oh, he's Wesker. Like what? Really?
Yeah.
I mean, also the part of it with Liara though is the fact that Liara in Mass Effect 1 sounds so goddamn different from Lightning, though. It threw me off.
Maybe the enunciation, but the tone is almost the same. The problem is the personality is totally different. So
yeah, that didn't help me. That didn't help me either.
Yeah.
And also the obvious one, Ashley in this game is Sandy Cheeks from SpongeBob.
Oh God. I still have nightmares about hearing Leon help.
And this game also checks the is there a Spider-Man voice actor in this game box. Reno Romano.
Oh,
from the PlayStation.
Who did they voice in RE4?
Luis.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Reno Romano did the PlayStation 1 Spider-Man and Unlimited.
Interesting.
But anyway.
And has no effect on gameplay. That feels like a missed opportunity. For some wild reason, they decided to have Leon find out Ada was still alive between titles, when that could have been a compelling scene to show in an actual game. Their dynamic is fun, and I think the game could have done with more of it too. I wouldn't say the story detracts from the experience. You could argue its meandering tone and subject matter fits the variety on offer in the gameplay. But I wouldn't say it elevates the game either, which is a shame. You're more likely to remember individual characters and their fun quirks before any major plot details. The atmosphere is well realized thanks to a great score that knows how to punctuate every moment accordingly. When to kick up the intensity to get you pumped, when to mellow out to give you a moment's respite, and when to disappear altogether to let the spooky environments breathe.
The sound design in this game compared to the rest of the series is immaculate. It is amazing. Every single little detail from gunfire to the environment to the enemies to your own damn self is it is very balanced.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely is it's done justice in the gameplay, honestly.
Yeah.
Resident Evil 4 feels like a seismic shift, but a lot of the reasons it's so refreshing aren't just because of major changes to the gameplay, but due to invigorating and tweaking things that could have been rejiggered in the previous few games, like CV or Zero. The interesting new setting, the diverse new range of creative monster designs, the more hands-on inventory system, tweaks like letting the knife have its own button, etc. Even elements such as the new aiming system and its camera angle could have been implemented with the overall game structure of prior Resis, as long as they ditched the pre-renders too, I guess. Again, what tips the scales over and truly changes the experience is the drop system and focus on locked-in combat arenas. Being encouraged to fight so much changes everything. Resident Evil goes from a series about delayed gratification as you slowly accrue resources, where often the reward for dispatching a common enemy may not be felt for a while, to a game about consistent, constant reward, sustained positive reinforcement. And that changes Resident Evil into something different. Something still satisfying to play that does evoke similar feelings throughout, but it's a move away from the type of overall experience the originals offered. A part of me wonders what a Resident Evil that had adopted the refreshed contextual, visual, and even mechanical approach Resi 4 did, while not shifting the rhythm of catharsis, may have looked like back then. But that's not something we'd be seeing anytime soon.
Give it another decade or so.
Yeah.
One question that comes up a lot is changing a series like this to this degree ever appropriate? Well, I think it depends on the results. The fear is that a franchise makes a drastic change away from something it excelled at towards a new style that doesn't excel anymore at what was offered before, but doesn't excel much at anything new either. I'd say though Resi 4 still plays to the beat of its own drum. This is a rare case where we traded some things Resident Evil uniquely did well and to a high standard for different things that Resident Evil 4 did uniquely well and to a high standard. And I guess repeatedly trailblazing is one way a franchise can remain consistent.
And that's it.
Interesting.
Yeah, the rest of it is him just talking about the next video in this series, which is Resident Evil 5.
Right.
Yeah. Now, before, if it's all right with you guys, I did find a specific video I saw a while back that deals specifically with the jumbled mess that is RE1's canon events. If you guys want to entertain
How long is
the
it?
idea.
Yeah, how long?
5 minutes. Just 5 minutes.
Well, if you want to see
Sure.
it, sure. It sounds funny, but okay.
I'm up for it, yeah.
Yeah, because it's the fact that, like we said earlier, it's like with RE1 specifically, it's such a unique case where that game's events have been twisted and mangled to such an extent where not just the fact that we can't achieve that definitive outcome in the actual game itself, but also the way the rest of the series interprets it makes it a bit more confusing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's check it out.
And this video, and this guy makes an attempt to like try to untangle everything.
Right.
It's like to try to discern the definitive events of the mansion incident.
Resident Evil 1 has two campaigns, one for Chris Redfield and one for Jill Valentine. Both have unique plot lines and characters, but the basic structure, bosses and puzzles included, remains the same between both. This can make it difficult to figure out which character engages with which story events beyond the basic understanding that Chris meets Rebecca, Jill works with Barry, Barry is blackmailed by Wesker, the mansion self-destructs, and both leads and their partners escape the mansion alive. But thanks to the many callbacks and tributes to the first game's events across the series, we can piece together at least some of what canonically happened in the game. So let's go back to the beginning and see if we can untangle this yarn ball of a canon. Welcome to Cannonball. We can use Umbrella Chronicles' retelling of RE1 to figure out the broad strokes, but with Chris and Jill being together there, while other sources make clear they stayed separated until at least the lab, it doesn't help much. Generally, we can assume events that lack a parallel in the other campaign, like most times Jill and Barry meet up, do happen, since there's nothing to contradict those. But some events flat out can't be considered canonical due to the splitting characters. Chris goes missing somehow at the start of Jill's campaign and Rebecca never appears. In Chris's campaign, Barry disappears and is never heard from again. Canonically, all four of them make it out, which isn't a possible ending in any version of the game, unless you imagine that Barry or Rebecca walks back. We have to assume that the surviving Alpha Team members arrive together and split up, remaining that way until the lab, or that Chris does get separated from the others and only gets inside once the others have left the main hall. There's room to at least theorise when it comes to events with more going on in one scenario than the other, such as Rebecca helping Chris to make the V-Jolt to kill Plant 42, or Jill finding Forrest because she gets a weapon while Chris doesn't, but those are tentative at best since that's not a consistent rule. But there are a few details with firm canonical evidence backing them. Jill's near crushing after obtaining the shotgun, leading to the infamous
"You were almost a Jill sandwich,"
is also referenced in Revelations 2 with this exchange.
Oh my god, are you okay? Yeah, I was almost a Claire sandwich. Ugh, does Barry tell everyone that story?
So this event definitely took place, but the callback raises the question of which version of RE1 is canonical, given that the line was changed in the remake, but the original line is referenced in Rev 2.
For so much good as RE1 remake does, those little details being altered in the remake, but later games still calling back to them, actively damages the canon.
Yeah. And plus, Barry shows up in Revelations too, so obviously he survived.
Yes.
And yeah, a bit of trivia regarding that whole Jill sandwich line. That was a result of a translation error. The original line in Japanese was "you almost fit," F-I-T, fit into a sandwich. And then when they got it, they're like, "Jill sandwich." I'm not kidding. That's literally how they interpreted it. They're like, "Jill sandwich."
And that's why the remake has the corrected line.
Right.
But then again, games that came out later still had the old mistranslated line for the sake of the nostalgia.
Yeah, because it's infamous at that point.
And that's part of the confusion with a lot of the stuff that gets changed later or called back from RE1 because of the two versions being in so much conflict in terms of canon.
Well, I think it matches the style of the 70s slasher horror flick to have corny things happen, especially in dialogue. So, yeah.
The series is rooted in, again, like the whole cheesy B movie aspect. That was, at least at the time, like in the 80s, that was I wouldn't say all the rage, but that was like that was the thing.
Well, Resident Evil was based off of a game in the 80s. I think it was made by Capcom. I forget what it was. The game was Sweet Home was the premise of it, or it was styled after it.
Yeah, it was Resident Evil 1 is a spiritual successor to Sweet Home,
right?
Because Mikami worked both on that as a lesser developer on it, and then went on to direct Resident Evil based on Sweet Home.
Right.
Yeah.
Second late, you would have fit nicely into a sandwich.
Meanwhile, Lisa Trevor from the remake appears in Umbrella Chronicles' Rebirth scenario, suggesting, alongside the design of the mansion, that the remake is canonical. It's possible that Claire is just misquoting Barry, or the inside joke among the surviving STARS members and their families has been corrupted and simplified into this X-sandwich line in the near decade and a half since the incident occurred. Since I'm more familiar with the remake than the original, I'm going to go on the assumption that the remake is canonical. Similar callbacks are made by Barry in the same game, such as
Who's the master of unlocking now, huh?
And
I have this.
the Master of Unlocking is a direct callback, even though, again, the line was changed in the remake, while I have this doesn't feel like an intentional callback on the part of Barry. So it's difficult to say with those two, but I think it's worth making note of at least. Richard is encountered alone by Jill or alongside Rebecca by Chris. Since this is the only way for Chris to meet Rebecca in the remake, and given how Umbrella Chronicles reveals that Richard was wounded saving her, making her very unlikely to leave him, it's clearly Chris who encounters him. This also means that Richard dies to either the poison or saving Chris from Neptune, possibly making Chris the one who kills the shark. In RE5's Lost in Nightmares DLC, Jill references having to play Moonlight Sonata in the first game, meaning she does that, not Rebecca. Lost in Nightmares also has some dialogue where Chris comments on Spencer's obsession with cranks, seemingly suggesting that he had to make use of at least one of the two cranks in the first game. One could take this further to conclude that Chris is the one who encountered Enrico in the mines, since one of the cranks is obtained from him. Of course, Jill also had to go down there anyway to be betrayed by Barry in the remake.
Yeah, that's another example of how RE1's canon is fucked up, because even in the remake, both characters have to deal with both cranks that involve... Both characters have to use the two cranks that allow you to progress.
Yeah, plus I always interpreted the line about the cranks, what is it with this guy and cranks? I always interpreted that as like making a joke about the series overall.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's like a direct reference to like the first game or anything. But it's just like it's like an in joke about the series.
One could argue it's a direct reference because it does make sense for one person to do one crank and another person the other.
Right. And then, I don't know if this guy's going to mention it or not, but in the Nintendo 64 version of Resident Evil 2, you can actually find a report by Rebecca. Where she essentially lies about the events of Resident Evil 0, essentially.
I think he does mention one of the files from that version of the game, but I don't remember which specific one. I think but even if he doesn't, this is still based specifically for RE1, mostly.
Right.
For the confrontation with Wesker, it's difficult to say. Your first assumption is obviously Chris, given how deep Wesker's hatred of Chris is in Code Veronica, suggesting that Chris is the one who foiled his plans. Plus, Umbrella Chronicles uses his death from Chris's campaign for its depiction, so if nothing else, Wesker was killed by the Tyrant. However, this confrontation is also the culmination of Barry's arc, where he betrays Wesker and embarrasses him enough for him to refuse to mention Barry's name in Umbrella Chronicles. And Barry's arc does play out because it's referenced in other games. Without flat out making up new plot points to make it work, we can only assume that either both confronted Wesker here and Chris did most of the work, or only Chris did and Barry betrayed Wesker some other way regardless. Maybe Barry shot Wesker, who was then impaled by the Tyrant. As for who kills the Tyrant, I don't think there's any evidence from any of the games, except in the trailer for the remake Pachinko Machine, there is a sequence where the survivors are fighting the Tyrant on the rooftop, and Jill is shown getting the rocket launcher. It probably doesn't mean anything, but is the closest thing to any kind of confirmation we've got, so I'm gonna make note of it.
Yeah, that's one of the examples where you really have to find a way to rewrite it in such a way where all of those major events could still make sense.
Yeah.
In relation to the later games that directly call back to that stuff. Like the example earlier that Barry did betray Wesker in the mansion, and I think that was RE2, like an epilogue thing from RE2 or 3 that shows Barry that explains that.
Yeah, the epilogue that they showed there was from Resident Evil 3.
It was from 3 because that he in the canon ending he does pick up Jill and Carlos. You're right.
Right. But yeah, there is like the alternate ending where like you can just get away with like Jill and Carlos.
But that requires the choice I mentioned earlier.
Right. But I'm saying like it was an option though. But yeah, you are right saying it is the canon ending.
Because I think Umbrella Chronicles itself does refer to Nikolai as having survived. So you got to jump off that bridge yourself when you're on it with Nemesis, penultimate Nemesis. Yep.
From what I can tell, this is all the evidence the series has provided. Do you know of any more pieces of evidence to suggest what really went down on that dark July night? Let me know in the comments. If we can come up with enough, maybe I'll release a director's cut of this video with a horrifically butchered soundtrack.
And we're done.
Okay.
But yeah, now you have a better idea of the mental gymnastics you have to do to reconfigure either version of RE1 to the canonical version.
Right.
Yeah,
so
even the fan community is like, we'll just combine Chris's best ending and Jill's best ending, and that's the ending we got.
Yeah, but again,
seriously, that's how they feel. They're like, yeah, we'll just combine those two endings, and that's the best ending we got. And Capcom's just like, all right, fine, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And as Fort Snake has done several videos on this specific issue. And he has made it, and he and many others on YouTube have made it. I muted myself by accident. That he and a lot of people on the internet and on YouTube make it abundantly clear that not a single outcome of Resident Evil 1 or its remake can possibly come close to like the canon outcome.
I know it's so bizarre.
Which is why I think it's like with the success of with so much success Capcom has gotten out of the RE engine, maybe we can finally get a full RE1 RE engine remake just to have the definitive canon story.
That would be nice, but I don't think they're actually going to do that. I mean, we were lucky enough to get the RE2 remake, and that took like 20 years.
I mean, then again, when's the next anniversary? Not next year. Maybe for
Ginga, listen. They're supposed to have a Resident Evil showcase this month. They still haven't announced the date for it yet, and we're like 2 weeks away from the gold edition of Resident Evil 8 to come out.
Oh,
so and they're not even like announcing when the showcase is going to be, because they're supposed to be talking about Resident Evil Village and Resident Evil 4 remake at that showcase, and they still haven't even announced the date yet.
I mean, I would say my best guess would probably a better timing for an RE1 remake would probably be 2028 for the 30th.
Hell, they'll reboot the franchise at that point.
I mean, well, if they don't get RE9 out first.
Yeah, true.
Maybe they can write something into RE9 where it involves something from the RE1/0 incident, and then can tie it back into RE9. I don't know.
I hope not.
But anyway, memes.
Yeah, no, I'm at the meme with just constantly being asked for help from Leon.
Oh God, yeah. Leon, help.
What the one is it the one I'm saving? Or okay, found it.
This is kind of funny because we talk about popular titles like BioShock Infinite, or we have these characters around us, even in God of War. They're invincible. They can't get hurt. There's no.
War.
Yeah, there's no like with what's her
Dog.
name? I'm trying to remember the name of Bioshock Infinite's
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, yeah, she's.
There was no escort mission in any God of War game.
No, the new one has your son who never gets hurt. He's always.
Well, that's not an escort mission though. That's
Yeah, and he
part of
helps
the
out.
gameplay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But part of the reason why there was so much hate for Ashley is because it's an escort mechanic that isn't even part of the main gameplay. It's just every so often.
Yeah.
Well, plus they mitigate that in Resident Evil 4, where they give you the suit of armor for Ashley.
If you beat the game on the highest difficulty,
Right. They give you a suit of armor for Ashley, and you're thinking like, oh, it's just a cosmetic outfit. No, it's bulletproof. And she can't be picked up by any enemy. Like they pick her up and they immediately fall to the ground and they drop her.
She cannot be carried away, and she's 100% invincible.
Yep.
And
so you don't have to worry about shooting her or blowing her up.
It also changes the ladder animation with her a little bit, where Leon he picks her, he catches her and he struggles a little bit because she weighs a fucking ton.
Oh yeah, I thought you were talking about something else, but okay.
No, the ladder animation.
Yeah, I thought you were talking about the other ladder animation, if you know what I mean.
Yes, looking up, but you don't get that.
That's still in the VR version, by the way.
And you only get you only still get that one with the default costume.
Right.
So in this ending, Ashley's in the water and Leon's just.
No, that's when it's basically the same similar escape sequence from DMC1 where you're escaping in a cave, but DMC1 has the biplane. In RE4 you have the motorboat, the jet ski. Yeah, you're escaping the explosion, and just like in DMC1, the RE4 island is in self-destruct as well. And then the final explosion, right as you get out, it launches you like in the air to give her some airtime.
Yeah, and she falls off.
She falls off the jet ski,
and that's the scene right there. But essentially, it's Leon driving away.
But no, he turns back around.
So this was the previous meme. Only instead of saving, he's launching nukes at Israel. I don't know where that came from, but okay.
Oh, I don't fucking know.
Show me the real Resident Evil 4, and that's actual Resident Evil 4. And it's now a picture of Devil May Cry 1?
Yeah, it's Devil May Cry 1, and then that's the original version of RE4.
Yeah, Resident Evil 4. Show me the real Resident Evil 4. DMC1. I said the real Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 Hookman build. Perfection. Yep.
What was special about that? That it was...
That was the one. You remember seeing like in the early promo stuff for RE4 after DMC1 was separated? So you remember like the guy with the hooks?
Yeah, he was like a ghost.
That was.
I was going to go in a vastly different direction. Like they still had the castle level, but it was going to go like in a different direction. Like it was going to be very, very scary and spooky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they went with what they went with, which was Salazar.
What is this?
What the hell? Is this because of Resident Evil 5's popularity that they like Chris a lot?
Chris is it's this. There's this whole debate of who is the real main character at this point, whether it's Chris or Leon. At this point, now we know it's Chris because he's gotten a lot more emphasis.
Yeah. Plus, he punched a boulder.
Still, that's a whole other can of worms.
Oh my god, that was such a great line in Resident Evil Village. You know that boulder punching asshole.
The whole thing with people who like Chris, an entire 100-page thesis. People who like Leon, he's a whore.
Yeah. Plus, I think the reason why they say he's a whore is because like, women keep literally throwing themselves at his feet. Like you got Ashley, you got Ada, you got there was that chick in the animated movie. I forget her name. It started with an A. It was weirdly enough they all start with A, the letter A.
Well, that was intentional though.
Yeah.
That was part of the entire shift of the series to the focus at the time.
Yeah. And then there's the whole thing with Claire and that whole meme, by the way, too.
The character with the longest running voice actor in the series.
Well, no, the whole bloodline thing. You gotta preserve the bloodline. Well, you know what I mean.
That and I was also talking about the voice actress, who's the actress with the most roles in the series.
Right.
Of the same character. But anyway,
I'm not sure what this meme is all about in relation to
the dog?
Resident Evil. No, the last one.
Oh, the
fight me, cunt. Disconnect life support.
What?
I don't.
Okay.
What is this?
know what the
I have no idea.
Jean-Luc. What the fuck is
Yeah,
this?
what is
Yeah. If you're here in chat, like, what the hell, man?
we go from Connect 4 boxing to
killing somebody.
I'm confused and lost.
Apparently, he just joined the Discord today.
No, he's been,
okay.
No, Jean-Luc's
No,
been
not
in.
today. No, the same day. Oh no, I was just looking at it wrong. He joined the same day he created his Discord account, which was like 2 months ago.
Yeah. Very
Discord
curious.
tells you that now.
Yeah, I know.
Ugh.
Anyway, that was interesting. I like the a fair assessment of Resident Evil 4. It's been a very popular game for good reason. It's part of our top 155 games in our voting poll that we're doing. So it is definitely there. If you guys want to vote for it, go to the Discord, and there's an announcement. I posted the actual list of games that are most memorable to you, and Resident Evil 4 is up there. If you ever do care to vote for it, go right ahead.
You now know the utter mess that Resident Evil 1's canon is.
Well, it wasn't that bad because the game is pretty straightforward in terms of what the point is, and that's to have an action horror survival-ish.
No. Yeah, Resident Evil 1 on its own is fine. It's just a matter of once you try to quantify the canon of the entire series, Resident Evil 1 is the main roadblock.
Yeah. Because we all know in the continuity that Chris, Jill, Barry, and Rebecca survive, but when you actually try to put logic towards that, it's like, which is the ending, which is the correct ending.
Yeah. Again, yeah, everyone survives. Wesker, in quotes, dies, and the mansion explodes.
Right.
Where, to the point where literally the very next game says that they went immediately to the RPD to show the case for the experiments happening in the mansion, and they were just ignored. That's why the BSAA was formed in the first place later on, so that they'd be able to take action against that.
Right, against the corporations like Umbrella.
Again, Umbrella was taken down not by action, but by litigation.
Yep.
All right. So, well,
and what's even funny? Go ahead.
Well, that was a fun take for me because I don't know too much about Resident Evil outside the first game, which I played back on the PlayStation a long time ago, and I didn't get very far. It was a very hard game.
That's okay.
Of course.
Yeah. So I got frustrated, but I did like the visual technique. I didn't like the tank controls. The forward is whatever direction you're facing, and they have to spin on a dime.
Well, actually, now that you bring that up, it's like a lot of people praising RE4 onwards for ditching the tank control. It's like they didn't ditch the tank controls. It's just the perspective. What are you talking about?
Oh, really?
Yeah. That was a big complaint. That was one of the few complaints people lobbed at Resident Evil 4 when it first came out. It's like, we have new controls now. No, we don't.
Nice.
And I'm just like, and just to cap all of this off, it's like, since we're getting a RE4 remake, even though I've said countless times that Veronica deserved it more, I really do hope that they stay true to Resident Evil 4 and don't botch it completely by misunderstanding why it was successful. Because the last time they misunderstood why Resident Evil 4 is the success that it is, last time they misunderstood it, we got RE6.
Yeah.
And the series has after that essentially soft rebooted. Please, please, Capcom.
Well, my whole worry about Resident Evil 4 remake is they're gonna play it way too straight. Like they're gonna remove all the campy elements.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's like that's part of the appeal of Resident Evil 4 to this day. That's what I'm saying. It's like they stay true to the original game. They play enough of the game straight, but also maintain the camp that we love the game for.
Right. If you want to see what I'm talking about, go watch Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake.
They're great games, but they play things too straight.
Right. They take it way too seriously. I mean, there are some lighthearted elements in Resident Evil 2, not many, but there's like that whole scene with like Leon and Claire flirting with each other early on. That's kind of a lighthearted moment that wasn't like in the original. So
they did try to balance it. It's just that that because of the direction
they took it too seriously.
they started taking a bit too seriously, starting with RE1 remake. Though RE1 remake still was able to pull off the balance between serious and camp. But but again, just like with RE6, with the main series, they are starting to play it a bit too straight with the remakes. I'm just like,
yeah, and they've already done that with the Resident Evil 4 VR game, because they took out the quote unquote sexist line by Luis about Ashley. He's like, I see the president has equipped his daughter with ballistics as he's looking at her breasts. They took that out of the VR. They took that out of the VR game.
I mean, the remake can just work around that by having him still say the line, but just cutting to him.
They won't. They hard cut it. Like if you played the original RE4 and then you play the VR version, that cutscene, it's a hard cut. Like you can tell like where they cut it out. You know, if you know.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying it's like the remake maybe can like cut to him more smoothly and just have him like have his bob his eyes up and down and have the same effect essentially.
I don't think they will, to be perfectly honest.
Something though. And again, and another, this is probably just a nitpick that they're probably just gonna. He looks too much like his RE2 counterpart. There's
Leon.
There's no visible. There's the passage of time.
He hasn't aged.
He has not aged barely at all. There's a reason why they have him look that much better in RE4 compared to RE2 for the originals.
And you know he's going to be moody too.
Oh, yeah, I hope he's not. I mean, we had a moody Leon in Degeneration, and that sucked. Shit. If they go the Degeneration route just to make it fit with the canon, make it fit with that movie canonically, which some of the CG movies are canon. But I'm just like, if they're just going to do that just to make it fit with that movie, I'm just like, don't, please. We want the camp.
Yeah.
Not too much, but we want the camp.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for your time. That's obviously a lot of lore from the world of Resident Evil, not just number 4, but the whole series. We didn't even get to the most recent one, which was, I don't know if it's how popular it is, but that was a big thing a few, was it last year, I think?
Well, technically we got to the recent one, the 4 remake.
Oh, okay.
Technicalities for the win.
Well, anyway, thanks, guys. That was good. Always looking out for other videos that are not as negative or not as bizarre. So we're not scratching our heads all the time and laughing at the camera. We're actually listening to someone who knows what they're talking about. It's always nice. So, yeah. That was, what's this guy's name again? It is the Gaming Brit Show. Okay, sir. Thank you so much. That was great.
And then the second video was from the Fourth Snake, which I think we did cover once before.
Sounds familiar.
Another pretty good YouTube channel. Yeah. Check them both out. Gaming Brit and Fourth Snake. They're really good.
Alrighty. All right, guys. That's only been about 2 hours. We did pretty good. So thank you so much for your time. Hopefully we'll have other videos. I think we're having game night tomorrow. I'm not sure what we're playing, but we'll find out soon. And be sure to check the Discord and check the announcements channel for that link to your favorite or top 155 games to list from. Whether your game is listed, I don't know, but you had the opportunity to make the list with me. So I do appreciate all the people who contributed. And please vote. I'll be waiting for at least a few more days until I get more votes to come in. And we can put that on the website and see what's what. And always nice to try something new. That's why we're doing this list. So games we never heard of that other people know of, that's why we do it. So go ahead and vote. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you later. And hopefully see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Smud sandwich.